Welcome to another episode of Humanly Plausible with your hosts, Rolly and Richard from the Pink Collective.
And before, I've been wanting to have you here because I think this is a good platform for us to kind of talk about everything possible. Organizations, communication, especially in your job and your role, is the reason why I was like, man, as a father, as a great leader.
That's kind.
Yeah. So before we kind of just jump into the whole thing, why don't you just give them a little bit of background on who you are? Just
sure.
The short version.
The short version.
Yeah.
I can go long sometimes, but I'll make it short, as Rolly knows. I feel like you already did the short version, Rolly.
No, but just at least your role in the organization. Yes.
Yeah, so I lead sales and marketing for Arise Virtual Solutions, have since 2019.
Who is Arise?
So Arise Virtual Solutions, think of it as the Uber of the contact center industry. Yes. So we're leveraging 90,000 plus independent contractors across the US, UK, Canada, Jamaica, India, to provide support to enterprise clients, those of which I cannot name.
Right.
But, large enterprise clients that you might call for any support or service. It's a blast.
It is.
Yeah.
So because there's a lot to talk about on the Arise side, which is really cool, and I'm really fascinated by the company. Again, like today, Dave is again co-hosting with me, filling in Richard's spot. Richard did want to meet you, but he couldn't be here. But so Humanly Plausible is the basis of the podcast is like we have this magic box.
I love it.
That now we used to handwrite questions and then just throw them in there and then pick them out. Now we have AI generating questions. So Dave I
think generative AI is like smoldering, not bouldering. I think it's a lot of talk, but not a lot of like action right now because people are so concerned about like the privacy associated with what happens and the hallucination type data. We could talk all day about that.
That could be a topic. That could be a topic. Like if we open it,
open the box.
Let's see how AI is going to manipulate us.
Yes.
Taking over.
I refuse to be manipulated.
Okay, so since you are the guest.
Yeah. I get to pick?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. The pressure.
Dave and I went first round and it wasn't too bad. And by the way, we're actually your second guest for season 3.
Come on, somebody.
So, yeah.
That's very cool.
Watch out.
So, Dave, if I pick something I don't like, you're going to throw it back in?
It's
not my show.
Had that.
Rules? That's why I was asking.
I don't know.
It's not my show, so I would say
it's our show right now. It's just basically what we're creating. So let's see what happens. I mean, yeah, I have faith.
We should ask the producer whether or not it's a good one.
Maybe.
Just kidding. All right, let's see. Wow.
Oh my God.
What,
scary.
What an interesting question.
Tell me it's not the AI one.
It's not.
Okay.
I don't think AI can fix this. How can companies handle crisis communication to protect their reputation?
Wow. That's tough.
Why so deep?
That's AI. I see. I should have thrown that one away. I didn't read them though.
Is every single question the same, and you forced me to pull this one?
No, it's not.
Wow.
And this is something he has to deal with.
Let's start with something really deep here. Why don't we?
Wait, hold on.
No, that's the question.
I know.
You don't have to read it again.
It's full of landmines, that question.
Yeah, it sure is.
Okay, so this day and age. So
I refuse to comment on the grounds I may incriminate myself. Just kidding.
This is if there'd be that moment we're gonna throw a question out, it'd be this one.
Yeah.
But
be careful in your answers, Robert.
Of course, always.
You want to take this one and kind of see, because again, I think you deal with this on a.
Yeah, sure. Listen, I'm happy to take a stab at it a little bit. I think the interesting thing about crises is many times in organizations, I feel like crises.
Yep.
Is that a word?
Yes.
Sure.
Crises are brought about by lack of information, misinformation, a point of view on something, or lack of education, let's say, on a particular topic. In my industry, one of the kind of most common topics in today's environment, when you think about the gig economy, is, how labor is looked at and the labor laws in the U.S. as compared to the way that individuals choose to work. So if you see some of the attacks on the Ubers and the Lyfts and the DoorDashes of the world, and whether or not, are they being misclassified, if you will, as individuals, there's a whole significant amount of labor laws that were developed early 70s, late 60s, and haven't fast forwarded to the way that organizations want to work today. So as I look at some of those companies and how they've dealt with potential crises in their firm, whether or not it's about how they work with individuals in the firm, or whether or not, if I think about an Uber and Lyft, what happens in the vehicle, right, that Lyft doesn't own or Uber doesn't own, if you will, and the responsibility they have to that. I think just having a really structured response unit or a team that can imagine the possibilities of the crises an organization could face, and have a plan to how to respond is probably the most important thing to do.
That's great. So it is kind of odd that he pulls this question, because
that's his job.
It's a big part of it, and it's so I think there's a lot of insight, I think, to our listeners, because depending on the size of the organization, right? Because obviously you're in a nice sized organization, but for somebody that is smaller, like let's say just not a mom and pop, but a 20-man operation, how would they prepare for it? Because obviously, like, let's say they couldn't afford to have maybe a PR agency or somebody involved in, internally. What would you suggest, or what do you think, or how do we handle that in general? Make sure I get you over here.
Yeah, I think a few things. For a smaller organization, and we work with a lot of small businesses, right? So we're excited about what small business can do to kind of fuel the economy. Not only in the U.S. but in other countries. I think the interesting thing, if you're running a small business, is I think as long as you're being kind of authentic to the mission and values of the business.
You went there. I knew that was good. I'm glad you went there.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad you went there.
It's important.
No, I because we were talking about previously about the role. What was the question? The leadership impact on the organization overall. Yeah. And so we were talking about leadership, and so I think that when leadership is right and the values, are connected, I think from a PR perspective, because again, we deal with PR as well. It's a better way to control the narrative. So if we're going to say anything, it's like, how do we gain control of the narrative? Once it spins out of control, how do we gain it back? So that's kind of what we're talking about. And the fact that you brought it back home, I thought it's interesting, because I think the smaller companies don't realize that. For instance, and I'm not going to say names, I have a client that they have a branded vehicle, right? And this branded vehicle, apparently, the owner of the company, and when he hears this, he's going to call me out on this, but it's okay.
Call him out.
Yeah. He tends to not drive great. Let's just leave it at that. And so people are going to associate with your bad driving and the brand.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to say what... Because when I tell you what he does, I'll say it off record, then it'll make you laugh even more, because then you're like, wow, okay, that doesn't make any sense. But you're not helping the cause, is what I'm saying.
That's like a micro crisis, right?
Yes. Oh, no, that's definitely micro.
Right, that's just the brand behaving badly in the marketplace.
Yes.
Have you, in your experience at Arise or anywhere else, have you had to deal with a significant crisis that you've had to...
I think it's the way that you define crisis. I think I go back to to directly answer your question.
I've left the question broad. I don't want you to rehash anything.
No,
that would be sore.
Listen, I think for me,
what's happening here?
I've been with the firm for 14 years, right? So I'm passionate about what we do, and it goes back to the point I made about authenticity, right?
Yes, sir.
I come to work every day passionate about the work that I do and confident that the work that we're doing is changing the way the world works. So because of that, you're going to get challenged sometimes as your business grows. So for small businesses, as your business grows, competitors are going to want to find ways to attack you, to minimize your impact in their market. So they may do things intentionally to kind of impact your brand in a number of different ways. That in and of itself can be a crisis, right? So if I think about scenarios in which we've had competitors, let's say, reach out to our clients and, hey, have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? All based on lack of information, speculation, right? They're just trying to create some form of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the customers to say, well, wow, should I really be with this firm? Where that falls flat is their lack of understanding that these individuals work with me every day. They know me as an individual. They know I'm going to be authentic, transparent. I'm going to keep it real with them at the end of the day. And I always say in my business, and I would say in most businesses, it's all about R&R, and that's not rest and relaxation. Maybe Caroli, given his shirt, but it's really about results and relationships, right? Your results will carry you through, but if your results aren't really there, your relationships, the trust that they have in you to actually overcome that hurdle or overcome the situation, whether or not it's crisis or performance, like that will carry you through because they trust you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
R&R.
No, yeah. So what do you think, Dave?
Rolly Rodriguez.
Look at that. My Lanta.
So Dave, worst crisis you've been involved?
Oh,
without depicting details. I don't think I've ever been in like a real tragic one.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that nothing's coming up in my memory. But
that's just because I'm what you've done to your life.
Because I'm 50 and I've.
Are you 50?
I'm 50.
Well, you wear it well though.
Thank you. You should, if you could see inside.
That's weird.
That's
not this podcast. No, this is not this podcast.
I guess my strong feeling is, or the feeling that comes up is the authenticity comment, and I feel like organizations, when there's a real crisis, and one that is in the media, one that is affecting a lot of people, one that impacts or comes from a brand we all know that's ubiquitous.
Yeah.
When they're not authentic and they are slow to react and slow to address, it's so damaging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that goes back to our question, right?
Absolutely.
Communication from the top.
Yeah. But again, it's like, like I think Boeing is going through this.
They are.
This craziness right now.
Quite possibly. 737 MAX 8, not to be specific or anything like that.
Right. But, I hear about, but then again, there's another thing to be, discussed, and I, probably not at this moment, but, because you see how the world of politics and what Trump's done to the narratives of how he spins stuff. And half of the time people know that I'm not going to be specific, but how he can spin stuff into a direction where like he's always in control of it. And if anything, he's like a Jedi. Like how he can control the narrative. And by that, my point to smaller organizations is that you have to be aware of your narrative all the time. So you brought up, that's what hit me, the authenticity of who you are as an organization. If you come across as a cheap car salesman, then that's almost, it's funny because my first business, our tagline was image is everything. I learned from that, but it's not far from the truth.
Sure.
And in most cases, in this reality of the PR narrative, a lot of times the image that people are perceiving is the reality.
Yeah.
And you can have the best product, the best people, the best organization. Everybody loves coming to your job, but the outside external communication is not the same.
Yeah, what I observe a lot lately is, especially retail companies, food service companies.
Yeah,
a crisis can be manufactured by a customer.
Correct.
Rather than the organization. Like there is no real crisis.
Exactly.
Someone's just upset about their experience and they go off online, and now it's a crisis for the organization.
Which is a good point in the digital world, how fast this can escalate. Like it could be some dude just had a bad day and he rips you, and then it's all of a sudden, then you have the people jumping on the bandwagon and you're like, bring them down, the hell with them. They're picketing outside.
The pitchforks
now, it's like we got a full out crisis.
Yeah.
Because Charlie had a bad day.
Yeah.
A perceived crisis, though, can actually turn into an opportunity.
Absolutely.
There's so many organizations I think have done a really good job using kind of the social landscape as an example where someone has a complaint, let's say it's valid, and the organization responds within seconds and uses the opportunity to either address the matter immediately, address the matter broadly across we recognize you had this issue, but also 1,112 other people had the issue. We just want to let everybody know we've solved it for everybody, right? So there's a huge opportunity, especially in the competitive landscape now, for organizations to actually set themselves apart because they're listening. And that like if you're really going to run a business and you're going to be authentic about it, then you also have to listen to kind of what's going on in your customer base. That's
a huge point because I've seen a lot of companies kind of use that and write it as and turn it into a good positive or an opportunity where you know what, it's been a weakness of ours and we're going to address it and we're going to grow from it. And there again, it's the authenticity word. I think that's really tying all this together for me.
I think listening is the most underrated skill.
Oh, come on now.
It's the most underrated skill.
Yeah.
It's where all the future of your business lies, right? Like you identify a product or a service, right? And it will quickly go away. Like I often think about you could think about like Smith Corona or like Blockbuster, right? Like they didn't listen. They didn't pay attention to what's happening in the market. They didn't they made conscious decisions to like not become the next Netflix, right? Or buy Netflix at the time, right? or become, pay attention to what Apple was doing and developing a PC that didn't require paper, right? So they didn't listen to what's happening in the market, to their customers. So like, who has a Smith Corona typewriter now? Like, there's one Blockbuster, I think, left, and it's for
Alaska.
Really?
Yeah, Alaska. It's for like fun. You know what I mean? Like that's it.
Like a museum.
No, I think they actually
use
videotapes.
Yeah, you can check that on Netflix. Interesting relationship there.
Arise is in the listening business, is it not?
I mean, it's definitely part of what we do, right? The whole core of our business is like to solve for things that people have to call or engage with their brands about. So
is there something in the training culture around listening? Like, it's one thing to tell someone, hey, listen well, or make sure you're listening, but it goes much deeper than that, right?
It does. I mean, I think the first thing is like people have to have a natural persuasion or inkling to have an interest in listening, right? So we're a digitally native platform. So we attempt to assess that capability before we engage with them personally or have them engage with one of our customers. So we're kind of, if you will, validating and or testing that early in the process through some assessment type tools that are available on the market. But that is one of the things that we test for is like, hey, can they hear what the customer is saying beyond the words that the customer is saying? Right. Because that's really what you're listening for. That's listening.
Yeah. What is you're listening for? What's not being said?
Yeah, totally.
So, like, I totally apologize for the question.
It's a great question.
It is. But it's like you kind of want to talk about something different, and he gets nailed with this one. But to bring
nailed with it, I love it. Like, I'm happy to address the hard ones.
I saw it like nailed. Like,
why did you want to do another one?
No, something different, like something maybe.
What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. Let's pick another one. No. So, closing thoughts on how can companies handle crisis communication to protect their reputation? So how do we bring us home, Dave?
I say quickly,
and don't say housekeeping or house cleaning.
Quickly, swiftly, authentically, and humanly is how a crisis should be dealt with. And whether it's from a business to their market or human to human, you have a crisis in a relationship, deal with it humanly and humanely.
That's good. Robert?
No, it's well said. I think the only thing I would add would be think about all the things that could become a crisis, right? So you have somewhat of a small plan, not significant, but just a point of view on how you might address certain things that might come up in your business.
I agree with both points. I think it's plan, prepare, right? And be, like if you put something into play, think it through. Yeah. You need to really think about. I mean, one of the things that we do before we put a campaign out is like we kind of go through like, okay, what is the worst case scenario look like for this? And so again, I think Nike. I just watched that movie again on how they got Jordan. What's it called?
It's a great movie.
Yes,
Air.
Yes,
so good.
They prepared for the eventual, not crisis, but the fees that Jordan was going to pay every time he showed up on the court. But it was a movement. It was great. So prepare is how I would say it. Prepare authentically and humanly. If I could just bring it all around.
Absolutely.
It's so plausible.
So yes, exactly. So Robert, thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
I will have information for Arise and Robert just in case you want to bother him on our channel. And man, thank you again.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you,
Sweet deal. Can I get a high five?
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Open your eyes, make a change in your life, find a new way of living. It's time to start living for the children. Live for the children. Not be televised. Oh. Who we living for? Yeah. Who we living for? My baby.